Shalom. Welcome to our Erev Shabbat talk. I'm Avraham Shira, and we are in Eretz Israel. We have a beautiful sefer in front of us from Rav Kook and a collection of his various stories and teachings. And tonight we're going to talk about the individual and the collective through the Rav's perspective. And he brings it in the context, interestingly enough, between his own background as a student of the Volozhin Yeshiva and the fact that his mother was a Chabad follower, and her family had been obviously Chabad for a long time. And he tells us in the beginning of this little piece, I'm going to read to us, and we'll talk about it, that Rav Kook had an affinity and a variance for Chabad. That he liked Chabad, he saw a connection to Chabad, and also he disagreed with certain aspects. And he saw this closely in one of his main students, the Nazir Reb David Kohen. And in the late summer of 1922, Rav David went to visit the Rav Kook in his vacation in Hebron. Sounds like an interesting place to have a vacation, Hebron, in 1922. It was not the happiest resort spot in town. And so he went to visit him there, and after scanning a copy of Likutei Torah that was on the table, he told the Rav that he found there profound thoughts about divinity, Israel, and Torah that resemble the ideas discussed in Rav Kook's Suda Shlishit discourses. So Reb David found a book on his Rebbe's table. He's from Chabad. He's reading from it, and he found some profound thoughts. And so, of course, he wanted to share them with him. And he also commented that they were similar to Rav Kook's thinking. The Rav replied, a distinction must be drawn between the ideas regarding man's relationship to God and those pertaining to Klal Yisrael's relationship to God. So this is an interesting distinction, that each person has a relationship to God, and then the collective soul of the Jewish people also has this relationship to God. Two different planes of existence. And Rav Kook, with the exclamation point, said, and we are engaged in building the entire nation. Now, this distinction was later identified years later in the Rav Kook's Hasidic thought by one of the scholars of the time, Reb Hillel Zeitlin. He wrote that Chabad concentrates on the individual, and only through the individual we reach the collective soul. So it's a very interesting idea, that if I want to get to the collective soul of Am Yisrael, which in Kabbalah is called the Shekhinah, the divine presence, the immanent God that we can relate to on a direct basis, not the infinite and eternal that is so far away, it's very hard to connect to, but that indwelling presence, when you feel the presence of Hashem close to you. He says you have to go through the individual to get to that collective. Now, does that mean go through ourselves to get to the collective, or I have to look at an individual and see him in the collective? And then he goes on to tell us, Rav Kook revealed the Kabbalah of the collective soul and viewed the individual only through the lens of the collective soul. So you see, it's like looking at two mirrors and looking one way or looking the other way. You look through the individual to reach the general collective soul, or you look at through the lens of the collective soul to see the individual. Now, it's a very interesting thing. And I ask myself, well, who am I? Which way do I look at the world? And what way do other people look at the world? And is this a useful paradigm for looking at the world, for that matter? But the question, of course, is a legitimate and important question. How do we look towards this idea of the divine presence? Through the filter of the individual, or through the filter of the collective, the general mass of people. So Rav Kook is saying we only look at the individual in the context of the collective. Where do you fit into Am Yisrael? What is your contribution to Am Yisrael? Are you part of the intellectual part of Am Yisrael, the emotional part of Am Yisrael, the physical, hard-working part of Am Yisrael? Where do you fit into the different aspects of the collective? Which is very interesting because it has this, it sounds a tiny bit socialist, a little bit of like, of course the socialists, lahavdil, they put the collective above God. As a matter of fact, they just erase God from the book and say, no, the state is God, which is pretty dangerous thinking. It hasn't seemed to work too well so far. This idea of socialism and communism, okay, so they're not the same exactly, but we're not going to go there now. But there is this idea that I find myself in the group. That I, Avraham, Shira, or you, whoever you are out there listening, find yourself by your membership to the group. Now, where I came from, that's a little hard to swallow. That's a little tough. Because I was raised in an American culture where it's all about the individual. For the most part. It wasn't about your group or your political party or, what city you lived in or what even your profession. It's about you, the individual. What are you doing here? And of course, most people define that in terms of their work. But, so the idea of looking at myself through the collective was a hard thing to do. Because, Americans, we're very strong about the idea of the individual and about our rights and things like that. And we come over to Israel, which was founded by a lot of people from Russia and the Ukraine, and a lot of them had been indoctrinated into socialism at the time. And they came and founded these socialist-styled kibbutzim, right? These farming communities where everybody ate at the same table and everybody washed their laundry the kids were all educated. Everything was collective. So it's understanding that shift from one to the other is very interesting. It's very dramatic, actually. Remember that in the beginning of the kibbutzim, they would take children away from their parents and the kids would only see their parents at the end of the week before Shabbat. And certainly that didn't strike me too healthy a way to raise children. Okay, but we're not here to compare that. We're just talking about our own individual service. Where do I find me? Where do I find the meaning in my life? Because I'm a Jew and I'm part of the Jewish nation, or because I'm an individual that has a relationship with God? And the truth is, it seems that they're both legitimate. They're both real. They both engage you in a relationship. But we have to ask ourselves, every person, that question. That we can't really I can make a decision based on what feels right to me. But I want to ask the question, well, where am I supposed to be? Where am I going to achieve what I need to achieve in this world? Where am I going to find the place that I can serve God from the best place? I remember when we got to Israel, and I made Aliyah as a single person, and so the whole world was open to me. And you travel to Jerusalem and to the north and to the south and the east and the west, and I consciously went from place to place to see what all the communities were like, to kind of testing the water. Where do I fit in? So when I'm asking the question, where do I fit in? That is seeing myself in the collective, and that relationship to the collective will give me that relationship to what we call a divine presence. And on the other hand, when I get there, I'm still asking, well, am I comfortable? Can I serve God here? Do these people talk my language? Do they put Aleph, Aleph, and Bet? Are their priorities the same? So this is an important question, I think, for every Jew to ask, because really we live in our thoughts, We spend our whole lives inside our minds. And who do we connect to? the people that think more or less the way we think. And that just means whatever, if my best friend, he puts, religion as the number one thing in life, and I do also, then we get along great. If another person puts earning a living as the number one thing in life, then he's going to seek out friends that put that number one in life. And so it's really this clarification of priorities, because that's where I spend my time, is in what interests me the most. And if I'm a writer or a painter or a lawyer or a doctor, I'm most likely going to hang out with one of the groups that I identify with. So it's a very interesting take. Rav Kook seems to point that Chabad first treats the individual Jew. It has to begin there. I'm not sure if even Chabadniks or Lubavitchers that I know would agree with this assessment. They might not. Because Chabad seems to be all about reaching out to the other Jews, which you can say is a collective operation. On the other hand, they're making tremendous efforts to reach out to individuals. And this question about the individual and the collective is not just about where you belong in Am Yisrael. Also, it's where is my nation? Who are my general people that I belong to? And what's my responsibility to myself first, or to the government? To my personal needs, or to the needs of the community? If I have to do a certain thing and the phone rings and the city calls me up and says, you got to come down here right now and do whatever they demand I do, whatever. Who do I put first, myself or the community? And that's a struggle. And that clarification is going on all the time. So for what I came to, the advice that works best for me is that I need both, that I need to be balanced, that I have to have this ability to turn to the community when the community needs me, and I have to be able to also turn to myself as an individual when I need me, right? When I need to reconnect to my deeper self. So Rabbi Nachman comes along and says, guess what? Go out 1 hour a day and be alone with God, and then you can be fine with the rest of the world. Rav Kook comes along and tells us that Shabbat is the place where the collective and the individual meet. That these needs and these needs, which often are at odds, meet on Shabbat. And of course, he tells us that in Rav Kook's writing, he talks about the messianic struggle of Knesset Yisrael. That the messianic struggle, it's not about one man becoming Messiah or one group becoming the community of Messiah, that our Rebbe's the Messiah. He says it's about the struggle of the entire community, the entire Jewish nation. And at the same time that they describe the messianic struggle of Knesset Yisrael for survival on earth, that is only in context to the redemption of the whole world. So if anybody thinks that the Jews need redemption and the world doesn't, they've got a big mistake. The redemption of the Jewish people is in part and parcel of the redemption of humanity. So in that way, we can look at it like the larger collective, the entire human race, and the Jewish people, well, they're like an individual. So you see, the expansion of the concept becomes universal. And we still have the same struggle, the same friction between the personal needs and collective needs. And every parent knows this. Sometimes you just want to do something for yourself, and sometimes, your kids need you. And you got to be able to, walk that balance beam. So Shabbat is the place, though, that both meet. Why? Because we have individual mitzvot and collective mitzvot on Shabbat. We have the mitzvot of lighting the candles. That's individual. We have the mitzvot of making kiddush, the mitzvah of having a suda with your family. These are all basically individual mitzvot. And then, of course, we have the mitzvah of going to the synagogue, learning Torah at the synagogue, learning Torah with a group, listening to the Torah as a group, singing songs as a group, dancing as a group. So we have both. And that seems to be the healthiest, most balanced approach, that we do need both. And then if it's all about me, or if it's all about them, the system is going to get stressed, that something's going to break over there. And so we need really to have the ability to be there for both the individual and the community. And of course, each of our families is a tiny community. And so this is an act, it's really a great school to learn about how to be in the world, is to be in a family. Because how we relate to our families, we're going to take that out into the larger world. And how we relate as a nation, the Jewish people, we're going to take that out to the rest of the nations. And as the people who carry the name, the people of the book, the people that are assigned this job, called the people who are the carriers of the word of Hashem, we have a built-in responsibility towards the nations, and that is part of the messianic process, the redemption of the entire soul of humanity from the bondage that we've seen so far has been pretty dramatic and pretty tragic. And we're looking for the good things are coming. The good things are coming. They're happening all around us. We just have to open our eyes, as the Rebbe said 40 years ago. The Lubavitcher Rebbe said, someone asked him, when is the Gula? And he says, you just have to open your eyes. So it's an individual transformation that takes place, that my lenses have to be cleared and I can see redemption. And if I'm always looking for what's lacking, well, then I'm never going to find redemption. Oh, but we don't have this, we don't have that. I know people like this. What do you mean this is not redemption? And they're just looking at what's missing, but we look at all the things that are there, that are in place. We see we are in this multi-year, multi-decade, multi-century process of the freedom of humanity from its lower nature, so that we can receive that higher nature, that godly spark that is in each of us, which God gives us Shabbat, which is it's like practice, it's like practice for the world to come. The Shabbat is like called Me'ein Olam Haba. It's a little bit of the world to come, and it's really a preparation for the great Shabbat, the 1,000 years of peace, when humanity reaches its divine potential. So I hope all of you have a great Shabbat, a wonderful time with your families, and also time with yourself. And to be able to have both is really the greatest wisdom. Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you next week at all the outlets, and all the best to all of you.